Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. Given it's been a few weeks since the October patch, for this video I thought we'd take a look at how things are shaping up after the newest round of balance changes, as well as how Armenians and Georgians are looking on the ladder so far. Obviously, when there's new civilizations and large tweaks, there's some very natural speculation that goes on, but let's actually follow up and see how those expectations have panned out on the ladder. There isn't really a strict order or method to this. I'm just going to be pointing out some of the winners and losers I personally found most interesting while cruising AoE2.io. And of course, keep in mind, this is just a few weeks of data, so things might change going forward, and we'll take it all with a pinch of salt. To start off with the winners of the last patch, we have to begin with the Persians. They're up roughly 30 spots on the ladder, whether we're looking at 1v1s or team games, which maybe shouldn't be a surprise, given they received basically 4 new bonuses, a new variation on the Paladin that specializes even more against archers, and also a handful of buffs thrown in for the War Elephant. You'd be forgiven for thinking everything about the Civ got better, though despite that, I wouldn't say they look broken, as with the current confidence intervals, it's not even clear they're ultimately going to shake out as a top 5 Civ, and may even fall outside of that. Players obviously enjoy the changes though, with Persians now the 3rd most played civilization this patch, up from 32nd most popular last patch. Another big winner at the moment seems to be the Bohemians. On African Clearing, Yucatan, and Mega Random, they're currently number 1, and on Arabia and Arena, they're number 2 this patch so far. So open and closed map dominance seems to be happening, whether you're looking at all ELOs or just 1200 plus. Given their popularity, we actually have a decent sample size, and Bohemians didn't receive any targeted changes last patch, so the sudden bump might seem strange at first. This is one case where AoEstats.io is just showing us the major patches though, as notice it jumps from June to October and ignores the September update, which is where the jump actually happened. Remember those pretty innocent looking changes to war wagons, dropping their HP and attack, but making them easier to micro and have more projectiles? Well, on the back of those Hussite wagon changes is when they rocketed near the top, going from 48% to 53%. That's really the big story here, with tons of fast castling, allegedly 55% of the time, though I'm not sure I completely trust AoE stats analysis here, as we all know real games are messy to categorize. At the same time, the Hussite wagon has become more popular recently since its improvements, and it's interesting to see that play out in the data. Whatever the methodology, their fast castle rate appears to be more than Sicilians, Spanish, and Turks, as a few other civilizations who have fast castle as a reasonably popular strategy. Again, assuming you can trust the categorization here, which I'd take with a big grain of salt. All this is leading into a nearly 70% win rate in games ending between 20 and 30 minutes, which is right up there for the most dominance I've ever seen in a time window in the stats. And on top of everything else, all paints the same picture of a castle age power spike with Hussite wagons, castle drops, and/or monks, leading to some quick victories. So if you've run into trouble against Bohemians recently, you're definitely not alone. Moving on though, another winner these days is the Slavs, jumping 17 spots since mid-October. This is a clear result of going from plus 10% to plus 15% faster farmers, making them that much more competitive. It really couldn't be more obvious looking at their win rate over game length that they get off to a slow start, but then the farms kick in. Funny enough, they still have just an average play rate and popularity though, and they're even top 5 on team games as well, with again a much lower play rate than you'd expect, landing around average. That could be a combination of players sleeping on the Slavs' economy as pocket, which remember made them a top civ last time they had this bonus a few years ago, though it could also just be players not finding the Slav playstyle as appealing, especially with Persians stealing the cavalry civ spotlight at the moment. And finally, our 4th big winner is the Saracens, up 14 slots. This is the first time in a while they've been out of the basement, after receiving 2 big changes. The first was their Monk Area Healing unique tech, and while this is a good tech situationally, I don't expect it has much if anything to do with their suddenly improved results. The bigger deal was losing the tech Zealotry, and also don't need to wait for a castle to have some of the best Castle Age camels, really giving them a fighting chance against cavalry civs in the mid-game and a nice window. While you tend to think of them as an archer civ first, and the stats show that's usually how they're played on Arabia for example, having that instant access to better camels is clearly paying off so far. Maybe most surprising though is they've gone from average to now a very solid pick on team games, though we'll have to see how that settles, as team game data is always particularly volatile, given an individual civ choice can only have so much impact when there's up to 7 other players involved. So with all the grains of salt you're already taking this video, take a bunch more for team game data. I apologize to any of you by the way with high blood pressure for this video's high salt intake. So that's the 4 big winners, and now let's talk about civs that are not doing so hot, at least so far. Starting off the biggest losers of the patch, we have to address Armenians and Georgians. They're currently right at the bottom of the rankings, and that's true whether we look at all ELO and all maps, or even just zeroing in on 1200 plus Arabia for the purists. Now, I should point out they were in the very low 40s at first, hovering between 41% and 42% win rate after the first week, but have come up to the mid 40% range now, which tells me players struggled a lot at first, but already seem to be figuring them out. While I think they're being undersold by the numbers currently, they're definitely not looking top tier. And I was surprised seeing comments about the new civs being broken or pay to win, as they really didn't strike me that way. They have some good unique units that in some situations can really thrive, but both civs are pretty vulnerable in the early game, which tends to be a huge factor in online win rates. Remember, Georgians lack 50 food, and Armenians don't really have a good eco bonus until late feudal at the earliest, when improved double bit axe starts to add up. Mule carts likewise are much better than lumber camps on paper, but can be finicky in early game raiding, and again take some time for you to benefit from moving wood lines. The stats do suggest that Georgians have a bit of a bounce back later, whether that's carried by their good economy or the Manaspa. Armenians, on the other hand, seem to be having a bit bigger issue, which is that they never really have a phase they're even average looking at the moment. Admittedly, that can be a weak early game, meaning that when they survive into Castle Age, players can still be too far behind for good bonuses and units to bring them back, which would look like a mid-game problem, but is actually an early game problem, just setting them up for a delayed loss. At the same time, their late game unit compositions relying on infantry, warrior monks, and situationally good archer choices all just add to their complexity, and it's possible that over time players will get better intuition for them, especially on the best way to use their early swordsman line upgrades bonus, not going for Castle Age champions too early for example. What's funny though, is at higher elos they really aren't doing that well, and they're actually doing just fine for sub 850 players, so maybe 2K players should be hitting them up for some tips. I am kidding, but that combo of a slow start and an infantry focus really seem to be giving especially high-rated players a lot of extra grief. I'm amazed even on Arena, Armenians are still sitting at a pretty unimpressive win rate, which is surprising given you're almost guaranteed to have 4 or 5 relics out of the available 6 by using warrior priests. Though having said that, players knowing how good the warrior priest is might open Armenians to more aggression than usual. Now just to touch on a couple of other losers in the patch, while no civ was really harshly nerfed, one big loser seems to be the Dravidians. And while they've been trending down for a while, they're now tanking quite a bit at the moment, down 15 slots this patch into the bottom tier. There's nothing obvious in the last patch that hit them, and it might just be an unusually large random deviation from a few weeks sample size. But it does stand out, with more than double the ranking drop compared to any other civilization. Another I want to mention is the Franks, who are sitting at number 11 after a few weeks. Again, there was nothing really impactful this patch directly, but obviously having a few civs like Saracens, Persians, and Slavs getting buffed isn't necessarily great for them. They're still top 3 on Arabia, but that age of constant dominance by Franks at number 1 on the ladder patch after patch I think is officially over, and we can close the book on that, though it was a wild 4 years. So those were the main winners and losers of the last patch that jumped out to me, and I'll be especially interested to see where the new civs settle, and what if any balance changes the next major patch brings for them in a few months. But it's fair to say so far they don't seem to be pay to win. That'll do it for this one though. Huge thanks to Seb, GS Jasper, James, Jared2142, Jockster, Justin, Kyle, Samantha, Stephen, Woodruff, and everyone else on Patreon for their amazing support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.